The definition of the word masterpiece is a work of outstanding artistry, skill, or workmanship. When you first watch a film that is a quote-unquote masterpiece, you most likely won't even know it. For a film to be a masterpiece, it takes multiple viewings to truly see the big picture and the little details of what the director was trying to show us. And in my humble opinion, American Gangster is an American masterpiece. This review will have major spoilers on the entire film. Fair warning. It's based on the true story of Frank Lucas and Richie Roberts. It's a classic tale of the rise and fall of a criminal chasing the American dream. Denzel Washington plays Frank Lucas and Russell Crowe plays Richie Roberts. At one time in the early 1970s, Frank Lucas was the biggest drug dealer in New York City. He was the main supplier of the most pure, uncut heroin anyone had ever seen, and Richie is the detective that brought him and his empire down. On paper, Frank is the villain and Richie is the hero. But life is complicated, and so are people. In the film, Richie is going through a nasty custody battle with his wife for their son. Richie is a crummy father and was a crummy husband who cheated on his wife. But everything wrong with Richie as a man, Frank does right. He's a great and loyal husband who loves his beautiful wife. He's a great son and family member. When he finally has enough money, he brings his entire family out from North Carolina and buys them a mansion. One of my favorite scenes in the film is when he's showing his mother her new bedroom and she sees a dresser that she used to have. This entire scene is very powerful. It's the "I finally made it" scene. It's him telling himself, everything bad I've ever done was for this. And it's a great day for him and his family. For a few years, everything was perfect for him and his family. But what goes up must come down. In many ways, Frank is a very respectable and likable character. As we watch him build his empire, we almost forget that the product that he is selling is heroin. But Frank believes in quality and ownership. If he's going to sell heroin, it's going to be the absolute best, and he's going to sell it for half the price because he understands business, competition, and giving the people what they want. And that's what America is built off of, giving the people what they want. It's also the downfall of America because what they want is usually destructive and illegal. During the Vietnam War, he goes all the way down to the Golden Triangle in Southeast Asia to buy the most absolute pure heroin in the world and brought it into the United States using the National Army's jet airplanes. Frank has class and always takes care of anyone that works with him. He shows respect to everyone, even when they don't deserve it. He is a true gentleman, but literally the first scene in the film is him setting a man on fire before he shoots him to death. That is Ridley Scott telling us to not be fooled by his charm, because he is in fact a cold-blooded killer. But we begin to forget that, and as we do, he brings his brothers into his business to share his success, but as he talks to them, he sees a man who he hates and decides to use him as a message to his brothers. God, I love this scene so much. You might think that this is just a scene of revenge, but it's him showing his brothers that he's not someone to be fucked with. He's giving them an opportunity to make lots of money, but if they ever fuck him over, he will kill them like anyone else. Frank Lucas is a perfect gangster. Frank had a mentor and a boss named Bumpy Johnson, who dies in the beginning of the film. Bumpy sold heroin, but he was never his own boss. It's like Frank says. Bumpy was rich, but he was never white man rich. He thought he owned his own company, but he didn't. He just ran it. A white man owned it, so they owned him. Bumpy was a good mentor and friend to Frank, but Frank surpassed Bumpy's success and wealth by learning from him and his mistakes. One of my absolute favorite lines in any film is when Frank's brother starts to dress lavishly and party with a known drug dealer, and he tells him,
"You're too loud, you're making too much noise. Look at me. The loudest one in the room is the weakest one in the room. I told you that. Alright?"
That line has always stuck with me. See, Frank has been doing great because nobody really knows who he is. To the world, he was just Bumpy Johnson's driver, and he wants to keep it like that. No one would expect for some driver to become the biggest drug lord of New York City all on his own. But like I said, he's also a good husband, and his wife buys him this incredibly loud chinchilla fur coat, and you can tell he doesn't like it, but he wears it at a boxing match in front of everyone to make her happy. And that was the beginning of his downfall. Now everyone who didn't know who he was is now thinking, who the fuck is this guy, dressed up like this, and how did he get such great seats? For once, he was the loudest one in the room. And it's so sad to see his wife's face when he burns the coat. After this, Richie looks into him and starts to put the pieces of the puzzle together. Also, Detective Trupo, played by the absolutely great Josh Brolin. See, Richie may have his faults, but him and his crew are the definition of clean cops. They wouldn't take a nickel off the street. And Detective Trupo is the definition of a dirty cop. To me, he's the real villain of the film. Any drug dealer that doesn't pay him directly, he robs, cuts down their dope to practically nothing, then sells it to the mafia. Before Frank, he practically controlled the drug market. Trupo is such a scumbag and represents the dirty cop perfectly. It's so great to see him kill himself when he knows the walls are closing in, and it's just a matter of time until he gets arrested with all the other dirty cops after Frank is caught and sells out every single dirty cop that ever took money out of his pockets. Now let's talk about Richie. Like I said, Richie has many flaws as a man, but he's not a scumbag. He lives in a world that Ridley Scott perfectly portrayed as a cement jungle that is surrounded by dope fiends, drug dealers, and dirty cops. Richie and his team are some of the only few that are somewhat honest. They all have their flaws as men, but they're great cops, and when it comes to work, they're 100% in it. Like I said, Richie is a good cop, but he's not afraid to bend the law at his convenience because he knows it's the only way to get these motherfuckers. Bringing this up, I want to talk about Richie's partner Javier. There's a scene where they have to stake out a car for hours, but Richie isn't going to wait, so he breaks the law and they find giant bags of unmarked cash, and Richie makes them turn the money in, which turns them into pariahs at the station because pretty much everyone is a dirty cop there and they know that they can't trust them. But a little bit later in the film, Javier calls Richie after he kills a drug dealer, and Richie saves him from the mob outside the apartment complex. This is one of my absolute favorite scenes of the entire film. The acting is just perfect on both sides. Just how Javier is slurring his words and the spit is coming from his mouth, he played it perfectly. And it's just an intense scene and you feel bad for both of them. John Ortiz is a great character actor. I always like seeing him in any movie or series. But after this, Javier spends the rest of his short life hiding as a drug addict and overdoses on Frank's heroin. Watching this, you think, this is why Richie takes it so personal, but I don't know. I think Richie would have needed to take down Frank without any of this. To be honest, it didn't seem like him and Javier had the best relationship anyway, but I think it's just Richie saw firsthand what the drug is doing and knew it was just going to keep happening to everyone else. But Frank and Richie are perfect counterparts. They both were great at what they did, but they both have their flaws. Frank had fits of rage, and when he wasn't extremely cool, he would be very violent. That's part of being a drug lord. People need to fear you. I love when his coked out cousin shoots a guy in the middle of his party.
Get up. He don't feel shit because he coked up all the motherfucking time. He's your driver, get rid of him. Come on, man, that's your cousin. It ain't shit to me. He don't mean nothing to me. What's he gonna do, go back home? I don't give a damn what he does.
And this is the cousin who gets arrested and wears a wire, which is the main reason why Frank goes to prison. I once had a conversation with a friend saying that if Frank hadn't beaten Jimmy, maybe he wouldn't have ratted on him. But Jimmy is a scumbag and a pussy who was facing 25 years to life. I think he would have ratted on him no matter what. But there's so many times when you expect Frank to lose his cool, but he doesn't. One of my other favorite scenes is when Cuba Gooding Jr.'s character Nicky is cutting down Frank's heroin and selling it with the same name, and Frank tells him the product is good as is and anything else is greed, and if he's going to keep doing this, he needs to change the name.
Doing this again. Catch me, infringement, insist. I don't like these words as much as please. Thank you. I'm sorry to bother you, Nicky. These are better words you use. You come to my motherfucking club without an invitation. Hear me?
It had been a few years since I had seen a great Cuba Gooding Jr. performance, and I forgot how great of an actor he can be. Honestly, I love every scene and performance in this film. It's a tour de force of a film. But we have to talk about that climax as Richie and his team raid the ghetto apartment complex that Frank uses to bag all of his drugs. Like I said earlier, this is a concrete jungle, and this scene feels like war. I love that they show his nephew played by T.I. getting killed. Everything about this scene is so badass and intense. This entire film is badass, and honestly, I think it's flawless. I think it's a perfect film. To me, a masterpiece is a film that every single time you watch it, it just gets better and better. And every time I watch this film, which has probably been a few dozen times since it came out, it never loses its impact. Every time I put it on, I think, fuck, this movie is almost 3 hours long, but it always just flies by. I always want more. To me, it's a perfect film. I wouldn't change anything about it. I love every second of it. Ridley Scott is a master storyteller and filmmaker. I know most people consider Alien or Blade Runner as his best film, but this is the one I love, respect, and watch the most. It's his masterpiece. Ridley once said that making this film was one of the most massive undertakings of his career, but God did he give us a great film. To me, this film is on par with the absolute best crime films like Scarface, Goodfellas, The Godfather, and Casino. Nicholas Pileggi, who wrote Goodfellas and Casino, actually produced this. Like I said, this is a fairly common story about the rise and fall of a gangster. Like the films I just mentioned, it's a genre film, and that genre is crime. I think the key to these rise and fall gangster films is liking the criminal. On paper, Frank Lucas is a murdering drug lord who ruined the lives of hundreds of people so he could make money. But films like this and Scarface, somewhere in the first half you have to think to yourself, okay, there's no way that this is going to have a happy ending. He's too successful. A criminal with this kind of success, money, and happiness can't stay on top forever. He's gonna go down whether it's from the law or other criminals. But Denzel's performance is so great and he's likable for most of the film. Frank Lucas, just like Tony Montana, started from nothing. He worked hard and did absolutely anything and everything he needed to not only succeed, but he became a king. It's films like this that kids with nothing watch and think, if he could do it, maybe I could too. Frank Lucas taps into that hungry child that so many people have in them. You can't help but put yourself in that position and imagine running New York and having all that money. That's why these gangster films work. They make you root for the bad guy. I love all those movies that I just mentioned and I grew up with them, but most of them came out before I was born. American Gangster came out in the perfect time in my life. I was in 10th grade and I felt like this was my generation's perfect crime masterpiece. So that's my review on American Gangster. Thanks for watching, keep watching, and you guys know how YouTube works. If you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and follow me on Instagram at cinemajunkies_. Don't forget the underscore.